Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 125 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about a trip we just finished up down south. We got a chance to go down and see the Redstone Arsenal, meeting with some of the top ballisticians in the country, legendary in their field community and the agencies that they work for. Followed up the next day with a meeting at Fort Benning, Georgia, with some of the best shooters and trainers in the world. And what we've learned and what we want to talk about in this podcast is something that we faced as soon as we got home here. So we just finished up 1,950 miles of driving from Monday through Thursday, 35 hours of seat time, traveling from here to Alabama to Fort Benning and back again. And then we started returning some phone calls and starting to work on some custom builds here. And a very common thing is I returned 5 phone calls yesterday alone, just asking about barreled actions. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what we've learned down south, some of the trips and things that we're doing, and talk about why and how we approach barreled actions and the reasons, because this is a conversation we have over and over and over again, and it's a good one. And when we had our trip to Redstone Arsenal, we actually spent a fair amount of time talking to experts in our field and some of the different issues that we constantly run into here with customer supply stocks, or more importantly, why we just don't ship out a barreled action and tell the customer to drop it in the stock and go and shoot it. So ought to be a great podcast. So without further ado, here we go. Before we get started, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifled barrels. They are made in the great state of Wisconsin, family owned and operated, and in our opinion, the best in the United States. So if you want a high quality barrel and you need it now, they have a new program called Krieger Direct, where you can log on and purchase your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. We'd also like to thank Trigger Tech, maker of fine world-class triggers. One screw adjustment, customers can adjust the pull weight, multiple types of shoes, multiple types of pull weights, single stage, 2-stage. It's what we put in all of our custom rifles here. So when you purchase an Ace rifle, you get a Trigger Tech trigger of choice in it. So if you want to upgrade your factory or custom rifle to a fantastic trigger, stop over to TriggerTech.com. That is TriggerTech.com today. All right, so we just finished up this incredible road trip. I mean, hey, I think nobody drives now without texting, so it's probably the scariest time in the world to be on the road and driving like maniacs. But outside of that, we had a fantastic trip. We got to meet some really cool people finally that we've been setting up to meet with for quite a while. COVID had caused all kinds of issues with things that we had in the works and some of the projects that we're working on. Thank God that is going away. And we're able to get down and meet some of the people that we have been, just waiting to meet and having the honor to spend time with. So we were invited down to Redstone Arsenal, and we got a chance to sit with some of the top minds in ballistics, as well as testing and shooting and setting up world-class rifles for all kinds of different types of use and agencies. So without saying any names or who we were visiting and why, but we were invited down with the ACE system, as well as a new project that we're working on right now. It's sort of working into patent pending, so we can't talk too much about the next generation of rifles that may be coming out that might actually be an absolute stunner of a game changer on top of the ACE. So, innovation never stops. Working forward never stops. Coming up with better ideas never stops. And if you do, you just, in your business, you wind up in it rather than, moving the ground. So it was really cool to get out and spend time with these guys and spend time going through all the different departments that they have and seeing some of the cool things. Like for example, some of the weaponry I got to see and some of the testing facilities just blows my mind. I mean, if you could have range envy, I guess would be the word to use, is both facilities were just like jaw dropping, like, oh my God, I wish we had that at our fingertips every day. We'd be in there, probably getting no work done because we'd be playing with all the different equipment all the time, but really cool. But one of the things that stunned me was, we were talking about really high-end custom rifles, and, with our ACE system, we're really we're about the very best gunsmith on his very best day. So all of the parts and pieces are completely interchangeable. If you shoot your rifle out, we can bring it right back to its like new condition and shoot exactly the way it was when it was brand new. No rolling the dice and hoping that everything works out and the rifle shoots okay again. That's really what a lot of these agencies are looking for. They're looking for dependability. They're looking for quality. And not just a custom one-off type deal. They need it to work this way all the time, anytime, every time. And when it goes out of service, they have to be able to get it back into service quickly and efficiently and shoot exactly the way it was supposed to when it was new. And that's sort of where everything sort of falls apart. So one of the things that really, we spent a lot of time there, and then after some meetings, got some really cool tours, and then went out and had some lunch and talked about some of the different off topics we always talk about when it comes to bullets and shooting and all the things that we do. But one of the things that stunned me, and this ties into when we got back here, I returned like 4 or 5 calls just yesterday of people asking, hey, I just want to buy a barreled action. Hey, I just want you to send me, I want to buy the action and barrel and have you send it out to me. I'm going to either buy my own stock or I'm going to put it together myself. And one of the conversations we had down there with probably the leading expert in their field. So is the issue of not just a world-class rifle when it comes to what we do. So think about like what we do as builders or as a manufacturer. We don't make the stocks. We make everything else. And so think about the barrels that we're responsible for either designing and being part of or selecting the best quality we can. Then we manufacture the ace. We do all the acceptance work for the barrel for the ace. And then, we had a lot to do with saying, okay, we want the very best and, work with the very best minds. And the 700 clone bat came to market nearly 2011. So they've been out for quite a while. But that's only half the battle. And it was amazing to sit down and talk with these guys. And this goes into why we don't offer barreled actions and how we approach the subject when somebody calls and asks. And just to throw it out to you, the listeners, is this is sort of touted. There's 3 things that get involved with them. It does save a little bit of money. So if you're able to get away from, the completed custom rifle, then of course the rifle builder doesn't have to get involved in manufacturing and the excise tax and all the things of becoming a rifle manufacturer. So it's cheaper on the manufacturer's end. It saves the customers a couple dollars. But there is a huge push in selling a lot of the components that you see out there as just drop fit. We buy a $1,500 stock and we don't have to have a gunsmith custom fitted. We don't have to have a manufacturer go through it and make sure it's right to fit it properly before it goes out the door. It's just simply drop in and plug in and play. And I'll be honest with you, it's not the truth. And it causes a ton of issues. So before you go down that road and think that, well, I'm going to save $500 or I'm going to, I want to save the time, I can buy a stock on sale. And I get that part. Trust me, I get that part. I remember when I was young, a small business owner, I was in the Guard at that time as an MP. I was a police officer and I held a full-time job. And I remember diapers and daycare and formula was like the biggest portions of it was just like I worked all this extra overtime just to pay for ammo or just to try at the end of the year to save up enough money to buy a new scope. Times were different back then. And, I don't want to go back and say, well, everybody should just, spend all this money. Everybody has a responsibility in life and everybody has a budget. And I get that part. And I never want to downplay that to say that if you can't afford to spend all this money, you shouldn't get into our sport, because that's not true. But when you go down this route of starting to build into and get a custom rifle or a rifle manufacturer like with us, with our Ace rifles, there are reasons. It's not about the money. It's about the long-term investment and the long-term cost to you when things don't go well. So let me go over this with you, right? We were talking to one of the best in the country. He is the man when it comes to talking about ballistics and rifles and research. Like, one of the project rifles they were working on, they had 2 pages of things that were just wrong, that if they could go back and do it again, of things that they found in the end that just caused all kinds of heartaches and pain. And the fitment of the stock was on there. And it went down a rabbit hole like you would not believe. And it causes us problems here over the years. So I have built barreled actions when I was custom gunsmithing and just building rifles. And customer would say, hey, I got my own stock. Can we use it? And sure, send it in. We'll try to fit it. We are not that business anymore. And the reason we aren't is because it's a nightmare for both you and for us here. Let me dive into this. So what brought this podcast to light was we're betting a rifle right now. And it is a huge big dollar stock. It is like $1,700 chassis, the best of the best, and a good stock. It's a Matrix Pro. It's a fantastic chassis. We build on them all the time. However, though, there's a video coming out next week of showing you why this stock had to be bedded, and it did. If you look underneath the rear of the receiver and you see all the contact surface on a typical Remington 700 round, for example, there's a lot of space, right? There's a lot of contact area that receiver can mate with the chassis. And my God, it was less than the width of a number 2 pencil. Was all the contact point was on partial left front action screw, recoil lug area. Behind the recoil lug where the action screw is in the front, partially on the left, partially on the right. That is all it was setting on. And the contact point we're talking about isn't the width of the pencil. It's the lead in the pencil, if you can imagine that, on how small the actual lead is inside of a pencil. That's all the contact point there was along the sides of the receiver. In the rear, it was offset about, maybe 100 thousandths off to one side. You could see one side was longer than the other. And again, the width of a number 2 pencil, that's all the contact that was in this chassis. And then this is one that's big right now. It was Cerakoted. We're going to come back to that. So I thought it was a great opportunity, and this was yesterday we actually did this. We just got back from driving like 2,000 miles, 35 hours of butt time. We left Monday morning at like 5 a.m. and got back Thursday night from going to Alabama and Huntsville. And I right back in the shop yesterday, right? So we got this here, and I tested it, and I'm looking it over, and it was just like, we see this all the time, and it doesn't matter the manufacturer. So I want to point out here, I'm not picking on Masterpiece Arms. I'm not picking on MDT. I'm not picking on McMillan. They have a ton of issues with this area. And the reason being is they don't know what action's going in it. Is it perfectly round? Is it perfectly straight? Is it perfectly true? When they were jigging it up in the jig, did they put too much pressure on it and clamp it? And so they put stress in it. When they machined it, it popped back out when they let the clamps go. So there are all these reasons, and it matters. Damn, does it matter. If you want a really great shooting rifle, I can't tell you how important it is. It's like, it is where the rubber meets the road. It is where you have the joint between what's actually shooting and what's supporting the entire shooting process, the stock. And so I actually took the time yesterday and probably looked a little rough around the edges. So when we post this video up, have a little mercy on me on this one. Needless to say, we were road warriors last week, right? But I had to take a video of it because this is why. Like, if we would have built this rifle and locked it in, you've got a lot of violence going on when you recoil, right? Things flex and move like crazy. And if this is all that's supporting that, less than the width of a number 2 lead pencil on just a little bit on the front left, front right, and a little bit back at the tang, and unevenly back at the tang at that, how can we deliver that? How are you going to shoot your best? How is this rifle going to repeatedly do what it's supposed to do when it gets dropped and kicked and banged around and, you're at matches or you fly with it? That is not a lot of contact area. Then add in Cerakote. Yes. So drives me crazy when we get a stock in like McMillan. I swear we got some stocks and it looked like they were Cerakoted twice. Maybe the first one was a base coat. So I'm in there just grinding all this stuff out, getting ready to bed the receiver. And I'm going down through, one layer, then what looks like another layer. And it was like greenish. Maybe it was a primer. I don't know. But do they realize what they're doing? Like when we fit that receiver into that stock, not only is the Cerakote uneven because we're spraying into like, picture a 4-inch round tube and we cut it in half and then we're running a spray gun over it. Well, of course, around the edges, if you think about this U that's facing you, right? So the middle of the U is deeper and the sides come up. Think about looking down a barrel channel. Where the edges are, they're going to get either thicker or thinner, and in the same way directly in front of the gun. You're a little bit farther away, it's going to feather out. And think about how uneven the Cerakote is in the application of where the high spots are and low spots. And then my favorite is when they use this dimpling process where it looks like the old popcorn ceilings in a hotel where you've got these little high spots you can feel everywhere. Well, that's just genius to put underneath the receiver and lock it together. I mean, there's nothing like having like 35 little contact points underneath the rear of the receiver to support it into the stock that's going bang and generating 60,000 PSI of pressure and God knows how much foot-pounds of energy and violence coming to the rear. And we're just going to rest it on a couple little dimple points, So when I was talking to the guys down at Redstone and we were having this conversation, we got onto the stocks. And this is a big one. I mean, these guys really got bent on this about just the nightmare of problems that they've had over the years. So much so that even some of the Cerakote stocks and chassis that they were getting in, they had measurable stress of 1,000 or more. Like there's ways you can measure how much stress is being put into a receiver when it's being locked into a chassis or a stock, and it's like a deflection that happens, right? And even those were measuring. It was measurable stress and deflection when you were locking them in at 45 and 55 and 65 inch pounds. Just the Cerakote. So much so that they actually had to bed 400 rifles that were Cerakoted inside the actual stock. Now, you can't tell me, and I bed rifles, right? We're teaching and training Richard how to do it now, but it's not fun. I mean, bedding a rifle is actually quite a pain in the ass, and if it goes perfect, it's a one-shot and done deal, but if you find an error or an area you want to go back, I want to touch that up again, you got to do it again, right? So it is certainly not a money-making thing. You don't make a ton of money off of bedding rifles. It's more of a necessity to what we do to make the finished product than a process that we like, wow, hey, we're going to bed rifles today. Yay. Everybody in the office is all like thumbs up and happy. It's a lot of work. But here we got an agency that depends on these rifles for people's lives, right? And just the Cerakote alone caused so much of an issue that they actually went through and bedded 400. Could you imagine that? 400 rifles to take care of that issue. So if you think it's not important, you're kidding yourself when the best in the country are saying that, hey, look, this is an issue. And then, we were getting anodized chassis from MDT, the black ones, and I love that. The fact that the anodized is pretty even and less chance of having like that big, dumping of Cerakote, but still, we'll drop a barreled action in there that we're fitting for the customer, and we see these little pencil lines. We actually have receivers here that, customers have pulled in and out of chassis to where they actually start to compress the aluminum. And so you'll see flat spots starting to form where the receiver's going in and out. And as they're tightening it and really tightening it, you'll start to see the wear points. And you can see the mirror image of it on the receiver. And it's like, where have we gone? Why is this even an issue right now that we've got $1,400 and $1,500 actions and $1,400 or $1,500 stocks that are being delivered that we're expected to deliver, just world-class rifles, right? And we can't do it without addressing the stocks and mating the two together properly. It's just like there's this marriage that has to happen between the two. And whether it's just that the stock makers have been doing it this way for a while, or the fact that there's just so many different types of receivers that can be off a little bit from each other, so the V-block bedding system in manufacturing works better and makes more sense. I don't care. I'm not a stock maker. I'm sure they have their reasons for it. But what I'm sharing with you is the fact that don't buy into the fact that you can just buy a drop fit stock and throw it in there and that it's going to, A, improve the accuracy, or B, that it's going to fit properly. We have over the years, and my wife is, our office manager here, and she's been with me from the start with working and growing the company. And she'll look it right in the eyes and be like, you're not going there again. You can't, because she knows. I mean, we've had, customers that would send us a stock they bought used, off of whatever forum, and, it was a good deal. And it comes here and it was bedded for another receiver. Or my favorite was damaged or didn't have aluminum pillars where it should have, was machined on or opened up. Or when we get it here, it's just a train wreck of the barrel channel offset not properly or touching in areas. It is such a nightmare that we cannot, in good faith, send out any barreled action to any customer and say, drop it in your chassis, here you go, it should shoot fine. Because when we have done that in the past, and we don't do it anymore, there's a big period at the end of that. When we have done that in the past, we've always have issues with that stock coming back, that, the barrel channel wasn't done right. Like, for example, we sent multiple stock back to a manufacturer. I'm not going to mention any names, but they were cracked. The customers were ordering themselves and coming in, and they were cracked. The wrong barrel channel inlet, so the barrels weren't fitting right and touching in areas. My favorite was we had one of the chassis manufacturers send us a chassis, and it was touching at such a high spot forward of the rear action screw that if you tightened the rear action screw down too much, you could drop the firing pin. How do you like that? So when we saw it, we were like, oh my God, because remember, we checked this stuff, right? And so think about this. This is a plus $1,000 stock, and it was making contact at such a high forward point of the rear action screw that, these screws can put a lot of torque and tension on a round tube. But you take an action and you support it and you lock it down in the front and forward of the rear action screw, and then you start tightening down that rear action screw, you can actually start pulling the metal down or the rear tang. And at 65 inch-pounds, when we tighten it to 65, we could get the trigger to drop. Now, if that doesn't make you step back and go, you got to be kidding me, right? Could you imagine being right on the precipice? You tighten that down to close to 65 inch-pounds, right? And you've pulled the rear of the receiver down a little bit, and over time, that's going to compress that aluminum a little, right? And you drop the gun and the gun goes off, or the gun gets hit on the side and the gun goes off, and you kill somebody. Imagine the dangerous situation you're putting yourself in. And how many customers would not know to check that, or let alone how to. Like, we were thinking, like, many years ago, by the way, of how we address this. And we were thinking, my God, we're going to have an entire page of things they have to check and look over when it comes to getting the stock and the barreled action finally ready to mate, and then the problems to look for, identify, and fix, and get it. When we're here, we're so in tune to this that we know what to look for. So when we have the action and all the metalwork's put together, we're ready to put it into stock, we're already looking at the stock before we even drop it in there. We're looking for the problem areas even before we start putting screws in it. And then after that, we're looking for trouble areas when we're finally pulling it and putting it together, and we're looking at contact, and oh my God, just how many issues. So we have customers ask, hey, I just want to buy a barreled action. I just want to buy a barreled action. I just want to buy a barrel. We're rifle manufacturers. We're not custom gunsmiths per se that we do that type of work. So we won't take people's barrels and make this from this barrel. Or we select the products that we know are going to consistently perform at the level they have to perform at to give the customer the rifle that they're paying for. And we don't compromise on that. So we won't build on X, Y, and Z barrels if we don't know them, which is not our cup of tea. And the same thing goes with stocks. So there are stock makers out there that we won't build on. I don't want to put any names out there, but I am telling you as a friend, or if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy your content that we're providing you, I'm being honest to say, hey, look, this is the problem. And there are stocks that people call and say, hey, look, I have, XYZ stock. And I'm like, yeah, we don't build on those. I'm sorry, but we just don't. There's reasons why. They don't offer aluminum pillars. They don't machine them in. We found that company is unreliable for their turnaround time or the quality of the work once it gets here, and we end up being stock builders anyway because we spend 2 or 3 days fixing all the problems that we find with it. The list goes on and on. So what we've done here is if somebody has a great stock, so for example, if you have an MDT, for example, which is a great chassis, or Masterpiece Arms, again, a great chassis. We build a lot on Masterpiece Arms. What we do is we will give them our cost off the cost of the rifle, but we don't sell the barreled action. And we're going to have you ship that stock into us, and we're going to look it over. We're going to fit it. We're going to address areas that need to be addressed. And in this case, we're betting it. We're going to build the rifle as if we bought the stock directly from whatever manufacturer of the rifle that we're building. So if it's an MDT Matrix Pro, we're going to give you that off of the cost of our rifle. Because, for us to lose money to take a stock we've never touched or ordered and only have to spend that extra time to fix it when we find problems doesn't really make a lot of financial sense for us either. And so, but we do credit you. So we'll credit you the cost of the stock off the cost of the build, and we would gladly build on it. But we insist to send that stock here. And it's not because we're trying to be difficult or we're trying to make a point out of something that isn't a point. We know this is an issue, so much so that it was hours of conversation, before lunch and at lunch that we were talking about this and the heartaches that it costs. Look, when you're building a rifle at this level, and you're trying to say, we want to build the best. When we put a rifle in your hands, we want you to have confidence that when your neighbor challenges you, your brother-in-law challenges you at the range, you're going to whoop his ass, right? if we don't have the quality built into it, or we don't have access to check out that stock, and let me tell you, this is an issue, yeah, it might not happen. And then that's not how we want it to go. So I'm going to do a video, and we did a video yesterday, just a prelim, couple-minute video. We're going to post it up on YouTube. So our YouTube stuff's probably going to go up on Fridays. Podcasts are going to start going up early now on Thursdays. And we'll probably end up putting up our blog post on Thursdays as well. We're going to do a blog on this particular rifle that we're doing right now. And we're going to do a short video that we'll put out on Friday on YouTube next week if you'd like to see it for yourself, and just to know that, hey, this is a big issue, and it doesn't matter the price of the stock. When I was talking to the guys down at Redstone, they said that there was only one stock they ever tested that didn't have stress in it from the factory. And I'm not going to throw that stock maker's name out there because obviously I don't want you to think that that's the gospel truth and they're all built that way either. But it was a really good suggestion on this gentleman's part to look at this stock maker, and I think we're going to reach out to him and potentially try to bring some of them in to test them, because if it alleviates some of that potential disaster on our end of having to fix and adjust and work and bed and like, for example, a poor customer purchased a stock on his own and then sent it in to us to complete the rifle. So he custom ordered it, right? And it was a stock that we would use here regularly, so it was no big deal. That stock had to go back to keep it under warranty, because if we modify the stock, then of course, the warranty is void. So if we do any type of machining on it, all this stuff, then something goes wrong. That stock was shipped back to the manufacturer 3 times. When it came back wrong the 4th time, we just fixed it ourselves. This is no lie. And it's just like, for us here, we're like, oh my God, hey, we didn't order the stock. We were doing it on behalf of the customer, but we still have to deliver that quality rifle to the customer. So next week, if you would like, stop over to our YouTube channel. We should have that video posted up on Friday. We will also have the blog posts and such out on Thursday of next week. If you'd like to see it, stop over and take a look at it. I think they're great pictures. And again, I'm not picking on any manufacturer. This has nothing to do with, this is across the board, regardless of whose stocks we build on. And one of the reasons why I just really cringe with Cerakoted stocks, and especially when there's Cerakote inside the barrel channel, like, I brought this up down there as a side thing. I'm like, hey, what do you guys think about the Cerakoting inside where the receiver sets? Because we used to do Cerakoting in-house here. We now have Pittsburgh Cerakote, do all of our Cerakoting on our barrels. But I know how hard it is to keep consistent thickness. And I'm thinking we're spraying into a U-shaped design. How do you keep uniformity? And have you guys found any issues like we have? And they were like, oh my God, have we found issues? And then they proceeded to go into a story of betting 400 rifles because of it. So we also had a great meeting at Fort Benning, Georgia. I can't really, say exactly who and where and what we were doing. We got some really cool prototypes in the works and some more patented things that we've been working on. But let's just say that they are the very best shooters in the world. They're the very best training centers. They bring the very best shooters in the world in there. They have a lot to do with a lot of research and development. And they are legendary shooters on their own. And some of the very best gunsmiths I've ever met. So we're talking guys who have been doing it for 35 years, building the best for the best. It's really incredible to sit down and talk with them. And they threw one of our Ace rifles in, so we took 2 Ace rifles down. They're working on a couple projects, and they wanted to see our system. And, we had been talking about this before. And then this leads into some future projects we're working on that just blow your mind. So we have some other inventions that are coming out that has a lot to do with going beyond the Ace and what we can do with the barrel now, and make your eyeballs pop out. The gentleman that runs the program said that, the thing that we're working on right now might be that last missing piece, or he called it the unicorn thing that everybody's been looking for the last 10 years, and not only making a perfectly or great shooting rifle, but getting extended barrel life and controlling an area that we've never had control over before. So it's really cutting edge. It's really awesome. I can't share any pictures or talk much about it yet. We still have a lot of work on in the background, but it was a great meeting nonetheless. So we took 2 rifles down, just zeroed them here. We put brand new barrels on our school guns, a 1 in 6.5 Creed, 1 in 6 Creed, took it down. They said, hey, bring 2 rifles down to test. Their range facility and shooting facility is just mind-blowing, amazing, right? And so they pulled one of our barreled actions out of the stock that was bedded that we had there, and they stuck it in this incredible jig for testing. I wish I had drawings or access to get something like it. It was just that incredible. They fired 2 groups, 2 5-shot groups through the gun, took the gun out of the jig and said, we don't have to test anything else. These things are hammers. They said, so often people come down here, with the greatest thing and these big improvements that they're going to make, and they'll put them in and they'll fire 1 or 2 groups. and just 2 and 3 times what we performed. And right out of the gate, we didn't cherry pick. These were they didn't even fire the second rifle. They were like, they're hammers. They put their test loads in it. That was their go-to loads to really evaluate a rifle. And it just shot them like boom, boom. Like, wow, that's incredible. Okay, let's go talk some other things. And away we went to talk about some other projects. So really excited on the 2 programs that we're working on right now. It's going to mean a lot to us as a business just to be able to support these guys and really put better equipment in their hands and get them maybe up a level, but not just in the quality, but just the consistent quality at that level, and make it easier for the gunsmiths and the builders that are behind the scenes keeping these rifles at that level as well. Just making their job easier for all the things that they have to do. So really excited. We'll keep you posted if stuff moves along and as we keep moving towards. And this other project we're working on, which I can't say much about, is really incredible. So keep an earshot out. I would say within the next 3 to 4 months, we might be able to put some teasers out. We're doing a lot of testing on it now, and we're working with some different materials. It's pretty cool when we get some solid data and we're ready to say, hey, I think we're close to putting this onto the market. We'll release some stuff. So thank you for your patience here the last 2 weeks. We had the last 2 long-range shooting schools back to back. We had reloading classes. We had a private event that we did for some guys that were from New York and Texas that are in a different industry. And so we had a great time with a lot of great customers. But, of course, our meetings down south were literally butted right up against the last day of our long-range shooting school. So it was just like finishing up the last 4 classes for the year, almost back to back, and literally, coming in and working at 5 in the morning and staying till 10 at night while the classes are in motion, and then finishing class on Sunday at 4, coming back, working till 7 or 8, getting everything packed up and being on the road at 5 a.m. on Monday morning. It has been a whirlwind of a month. So I apologize for those that have been listening to the podcast that we only put 2 out this month just because we had so much other things going on. Should get back into a regular basis. The very next podcast, I'm going to bring on Richard Jones. He's one of our instructors here. Longtime friend. I've known Richard for decades. He has retired from his industry, and I'd ask him if he would come down and help us in ours as our business is growing and changing. And so I'd like to bring him on the next podcast, talk a little bit about his history and shooting, and probably bring him on and have him doing some interviews as well. He's just a great personality the whole way around. So I do want to say a quick thanks to our last sponsor, MDT, is a maker of proud chassis. And, we build on them here. We do bed them, of course, just like everybody else's, but MDT offers everything from the HNT, the new ACC chassis that the ACC Elite, I believe is what they're calling it. We have one on order now. And, just everybody's coming up with some really great, innovative, top-of-the-line chassis. But we still have to get that marriage between all the metal work in the chassis or the barreled action in the chassis working properly as a team. So if you really are in the market for an aftermarket stock that you can adjust and fit better, all these great things, you stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to, you can stop over to our homepage, it's wolfprecision.net, where you can see our blog post we're going to put up next week on the bedding. I think we have one blog post we posted up there as well. You can also stop over to Patreon. So if you like the podcast and you'd like to support it, you can become a Patreon at Patreon. Just type in Wolf Precision and we'll pop right up. We certainly appreciate the help with that as well. So thank you so much for everyone for taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Till next week, my name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.